Hello Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, so whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, we probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And today's topic is the Watcher in the Water. So, the Watcher in the Water, enigmatic monster, guards the west gate of Moria, almost kills our hero, Frodo. But Tolkien is pretty vague about the origin of this creature. So I'm going to show you some differences between the book versus the movie, and then also maybe guess at some of the origins, perhaps, of the Watcher in the Water. So I'm going to read you a passage from the Fellowship of the Ring as the Fellowship is journeying towards Moria. And you'll see that Gandalf is looking for a particular stream. And that's really important. It's not really mentioned so much in the movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, but in the book, it shows a lot about the ecology of our Watcher in the Water. So here you go. Gimli now walked ahead by the wizard's side, so eager was he to come to Moria. The only road of old to Moria from the west had lain along the course of a stream, the Serannon, and ran out from the feet of the cliffs near where the doors had stood. But either Gandalf was astray, or else the land had changed in recent years, for he did not strike the stream where he looked to find it, only a few miles southwards from their start. "Ah, here it is at last," said Gandalf. "This is where the stream ran, Serannon, the Gate Stream, they used to call it. But what has happened to the water? I cannot guess. It used to be swift and noisy. Come, we must hurry on. We are late." Okay, so they find the stream, but the stream is much narrower, much less vibrant than Gandalf remembers it. So they come up near to Moria, and as you get near the gate, there's a cliff, and then kind of a promontory, a ridge, and then it comes to the door, which is at the face of a mountain. So this cliffside used to have a river that would go over the cliff and then just form this river and head out to the elven kingdom of Holland. And on that cliffside, there were also some stairs cut into the cliff. You know, dwarves like to carve stairs out of stone. And so that's what they did. It was the way you could get up to the gates of Moria. And so that waterfall was called the Stair Falls because there's a set of stairs cut right next to them. So they're trying to look for these falls, but the falls are not to be seen. And so instead, you'll find that they say they find the stairs themselves without the water. They found the stone steps without difficulty, and Gimli sprang swiftly up them, followed by Gandalf and Frodo. When they reached the top, they saw that they could go no further that way, and the reason for the drying up of the Gate Stream was revealed. Before them stretched a dark, still lake. Neither sky nor sunset was reflected on its sullen surface. The Serannon had been dammed and had filled all the valley. "There are the walls of Moria," said Gandalf, pointing across the water. "And there the gate once stood upon a time, the elven door at the end of the road from Hollin by which we have come. But this way is blocked. None of the company, I guess, will wish to swim the gloomy water at the end of the day. It has an unwholesome look." So first off, he actually, maybe just for a second, Gandalf entertains the idea of swimming across that pool to get to the door, which would have been disastrous. So yes, he was correct. It had an unwholesome look. But so what they see is the waterfall isn't running and the stream is practically non-existent anymore because this area has been dammed. Right in front of the waterfall, there's been a dam, and so the water's all backed up into a very large pool that now hangs out right in front of the door of Moria. Now here's another difference between the movie and the book. In the movie, as the Fellowship is waiting for Gandalf to try to figure out the incantations to open the door, you see Merry and Pippin are throwing stones into the pool, and I think it's Aragorn. It says, "Do not disturb the water." Okay. Well, in the book, it actually has Boromir as our culprit, throwing rocks into the water, and it's Frodo who has this real sense of unease about the pool. So it's kind of interesting. I could see that Peter Jackson wanted to maybe make Aragorn more of our knowledgeable tracker guy who would have better sense about these kind of things. But it's actually Frodo in the book that is like, whoa, 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 ixnay on the throwing stones A. So here you go. Here's the quote. So this is when we start, it's Boromir talking. How I hate this foul pool. He stooped. Picking up a large stone, he cast it far into the dark water. The stone vanished with a soft slap, and at the same instant there was a swish and a bubble. Great rippling rings formed on the surface out beyond where the stone had fallen, and they moved slowly towards the foot of the cliff. "Why did you do that, Boromir?" said Frodo. "I hate this place too, and I'm afraid. I don't know of what, not of wolves or the dark behind the doors, but of something else. I am afraid of the pool. Don't disturb it." So yeah, it's Frodo calling out, and we're going to see that this creature, this Watcher, seems to have, be fixed on Frodo in a way. And so we'll talk more about what that means about the Watcher in a second, but just know that it's coming from both ways here. Frodo is sensing the creature, and the creature is sensing Frodo. Here's a little Easter egg for you from this particular scene. So at the moment when Gandalf is attempting to speak friend and enter, to open the door, he says a phrase in Elvish. And that phrase that he utters in the movie is, I believe it's an exact phrasing of what he says in the book. And it's interesting because there's no translation of what he says in the book. However, there's plenty of nerds out there who can translate, and so I have found the translation for what Gandalf actually says. I'll give you my best version of Gandalf's Elvish, and then I'll tell you what the translation is. This is where before he figures out Melon is the speak friend and enter, he says, "Anon Ethelin Adro Hiaman Fenas Nogothrim Lasto Beth Lamin." And so what that means is, "Gate of the Elves, open now for us. Doorway of the dwarf folk, listen to the word of my tongue." So, right, he's, I don't know, he's shooting the moon there. He's just trying to guess at what might open the door. Does he think maybe just speaking Elvish triggers the door somehow or something? Because it's pretty generic. Hey, door open. So yeah, Gate of the Elves, doorway of the dwarf folk. You can see how he's attempting to relate to this door that was made by both elves and dwarves. So obviously he does eventually say the magic phrase, and the party begins to come in, and at this point I'll pick up with the Watcher in the Water attacking Frodo. He strode forward and set his foot on the lowest step. But at that moment, several things happened. Frodo felt something seize him by the ankle, and he fell with a cry. The others swung round and saw the waters of the lake seething as if a host of snakes were swimming up from the southern end. Out from the water a long, sinuous tentacle had crawled. It was pale green and luminous and wet. Its fingered end had hold of Frodo's foot and was dragging him into the water. Sam, on his knees, was now slashing at it with a knife. The arm let go of Frodo, and Sam pulled him away, crying out for help. 20 other arms came rippling out. The dark water boiled, and there was a hideous stench. "Into the gateway! Up the stairs! Quick!" shouted Gandalf, leaping back. Rousing them from the horror that seemed to have rooted all but Sam to the ground where they stood, he drove them forward. They were just in time. Sam and Frodo were only a few steps up, and Gandalf had just begun to climb when the groping tentacles writhed across the narrow shore and fingered the cliff wall and the doors. One came wriggling over the threshold, glistening in the starlight. Gandalf turned and paused. If he was considering what word would close the gate again from within, there was no need. Many coiling arms seized the doors on either side, and with horrible strength swung them round. With a shattering echo they slammed, and all light was lost. A noise of rending and crashing came dully through the ponderous stone. So yeah, this thing is very intimidating. Even the version in the book, I think the version in the movie is even more, it's like a kraken or something coming out. But in this case, it's got 20 arms at least, and it shuts them in. I think it breaks part of the door and breaks the mountain behind them so that there is no way out. And that really, we'll talk about this, but that is the strangest part of the actions of our Watcher in the water. You know, I can kind of understand why it might be going for Frodo and that kind of thing, but the fact that once they escape, it closes them in. That's the part that really is very mysterious. What does that mean? So we'll talk more about that as we go through here. But finishing up here as we get the full lay of the land on our Watcher in the water. Okay, so they've just escaped. The Watcher has sealed them in from the west, and it's Frodo talking to Gandalf. I felt that something horrible was near from the moment that my foot first touched the water, said Frodo. What was the thing? Or were there many of them? I do not know, answered Gandalf, but the arms were all guided by one purpose. Something has crept, or has been driven out of the dark waters under the mountains. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world. He did not speak aloud his thought that whatever it was that dwelt in the lake, it had seized on Frodo first among all the company. Love that phrase, by the way. It's one of my favorite Gandalf phrases. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world. So, yeah, he's indicating that somehow, maybe below Moria or something, there was some kind of an underground lake. Obviously, there was water that was coming out for this river, the Serannon. That somehow this thing perhaps found its way into the pool outside of Moria. We'll talk more about that here in a second. But that phrase, older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world, will come back to a very specific phrase, actually in the Two Towers, that we'll get to in a second. Okay, so they have successfully avoided our monster. The monster has sealed them in. They note, well, the thing was kind of after Frodo. Later, when they end up finding the Book of Mazarbul, which basically means records. It's the Book of Records. Like if they went to the Dwarven DMV, they could go to the Dwarven Mazarbul office. But they find this book. It's a journal. Love this scene too. This whole bit in the books and in the movies is one of my favorite sections. Moria is great. And so as Gandalf is trying to piece together what he can from reading the journal, he comes upon this script that's a change in the script. Obviously, there's like a new scribe who is kind of finishing stuff off with a flourish. And it's Gimli who recognizes the script. Wait, there is something. A large, bold hand using an elvish script. That would be Ori's hand, said Gimli, looking over the wizard's arm. He could write well and speedily, and often used the elvish characters. I fear he had ill tidings to record in a fair hand. So it's Ori who has been scribing this. If you remember, Ori is from The Hobbit. If you saw the Hobbit movies, he's in there. So he's one of the company of dwarves. And I think it's pretty safe to say that in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, when we see the skeleton that's kind of holding the book, that skeleton is probably Ori. So that's the fate of Ori from The Hobbit. He's hanging out in the chamber of Mazarbul. All right, so looking over this journal, they're reading Ori's entries. And there's one in particular that deals with the Watcher in the water. And I think it's very important for how this thing came to be. The last lines run, "The pool is up to the wall at Westgate. The watcher in the water took Owen. We cannot get out. The end comes. And then drums, drums in the deep." Okay, so the watcher in the water took Owen. Owen was another member of that dwarven company, obviously with Balin as well. And so he met his end from that creature. The watcher in the water took him, never seen again. But it's that the pool is up to the wall at Westgate. I think that's really interesting. So what that says to me is that the pool has been growing since the dwarves took up residence. And so let me give you a quick little timeline here. You go back, this is all in the Third Age. So, the end of the Third Age, 3019 is our War of the Ring. So this stuff is all happening within a 1,000 years or so of the War of the Ring. 1980 of the Third Age, that's when the Balrog wakes up in Moria and chases the dwarves out. The orcs come in. We know from the text that Gandalf had visited Moria at some point. He entered actually from the eastern side, but he passed all the way through to the west, and he opened the gates from the inside. Hence, he didn't have to know the password to get out. But he traversed entire Moria. We're not sure the exact year, but it's probably around 2850. It's around that time he was looking for Thrain, Thorin's father. Didn't find him in Moria, but eventually found him in Dol Guldur. But in any case, I think around 2850, it's Gandalf is passing through Moria. So that's 900 years or so after the Balrog has been awakened. It's somewhere in Moria. But the reason I bring that up is Gandalf is surprised when he's come back here with the Fellowship that the Serennan River has apparently dried up. And he's very surprised to see that it's been dammed. And there's this pool there. So what that says to me is that in 2850 or so of the Third Age, that dam, that pool didn't exist, which means there was no watcher in the water at that moment. We also know that Aragorn visited Moria. Almost certainly he visited before Balin's expedition, because he wasn't really aware of the state of affairs in Moria, post Balin. So he probably came from the eastern gate as well. It seems like he didn't actually get all the way through to the west. It seemed like Gandalf was the only one who'd made it all the way through. So maybe he came in from the east and left from the east. And he probably did that, if I had to guess, probably around 2980. That's when he's hanging out in Lorien. He's meeting up with Arwen. And Lorien is very close, obviously, to the eastern gate of Moria. So maybe he did some kind of reconnaissance mission around that time. But that's 2980. So you've got, again, 1980, Balrog. 2850-ish, Gandalf. 2980-ish, Aragorn. Then 2989, so maybe a little less than 10 years after Aragorn visits, is when Balin's like, we're going back to take Moria. 2989, they go. And within 5 years, all the dwarves are dead. 2994 is when the orcs reclaim everything and all the dwarves are killed. So, but my point being that this pool does not exist until pretty close up to the time when we're talking about it here with Balin. So what I think has happened is Balin's group arrives in 2989. They take over at first. They push the orcs back. The orcs then push them back. And part of that is they start to trap the dwarves. They don't want them to leave from the west. So it's the orcs that dam up the river so that it'll form this giant pool that will limit the egress from the western gate. Hence, when Ori says the pool is up to the wall at Westgate, I think, they've been keeping an eye on how much that water has been growing, how much the pool has been growing. And it obviously would be growing as a result of being recently dammed up. So I think it's a battle tactic of the orcs, and it is that we cannot get out. Yeah, they're trapped. If they try to come out the west, there's this giant pool of water with really dangerous things in it. I don't think the orcs introduced the Watcher in the Water. I think the Watcher in the Water found its way to this pool, probably because it's one of the larger sources of water in the immediate area, and it needs a fair amount of water to sustain itself, probably. So that's where I think the Watcher in the Water shows up around the same time as Balin and company. So I've got one more quote for you, and this is from The Two Towers when Gandalf returns. Spoiler alert. And he's telling the story of this, what happened after he was pulled from the bridge by the Balrog. "Deep is the abyss that is spanned by Durin's bridge, and none has measured it," said Gimli. "Yet it has a bottom, beyond light and knowledge," said Gandalf. "Thither I came at last, to the uttermost foundations of stone. He was with me still. His fire was quenched, but now he was a thing of slime, stronger than a strangling snake. We fought far under the living earth, where time is not counted. Ever he clutched me, and ever I hewed him, till at last he fled into dark tunnels. They were not made by Durin's folk, Gimli, son of Glóin. Far, far below the deepest delvings of the dwarves, the world is gnawed by nameless things. Even Sauron knows them not. They are older than he. Now I have walked there, but I will bring no report to darken the light of day. In that despair my enemy was my only hope, and I pursued him, clutching at his heel. Thus he brought me back at last to the secret ways of Khazad-dûm. Too well he knew them all. Ever up now we went, until we came to the endless stair." "Long has that been lost," said Gimli. "Many have said that it was never made, save in legend, but others say it was destroyed." "It was made, and it had not been destroyed," said Gandalf. So just real fast there, where he's talking about the endless stair. It is this kind of winding staircase that the dwarves built from the top of the mountain, which there was a tower at the very top of the mountain called Durin's Tower, and it led all the way down, way down, until it met with these dark tunnels, the non-dwarf made tunnels that are below even where the dwarves delved. Gandalf followed these stairs up, following the Balrog. They fight on top of the mountain. Gandalf wins. He casts down Balrog, and as a result of that battle, Durin's Tower is destroyed. And also then, where the stairs come out into Durin's Tower, that area is shut down. So you can't actually enter the endless stair from the outside anymore. And if you were climbing up the endless stair, you would be blocked. You wouldn't be able to get out up the top anymore. But yeah, another huge work of architecture that the dwarves pulled off. But what I want to call your attention to is the world is gnawed by nameless things. Even Sauron knows them not. They're older than Sauron. Take that quote in context with there are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world. Both of those lines are talking about Moria, about the world beneath and in Moria. The older and fouler things than orcs is, I think, a direct reference to the Watcher in the Water. And so I feel like the world is gnawed by nameless things happen to be these tunnels that are right nearby. I feel like this is a pretty strong implication that maybe one of these old nameless things, ancient nameless things, is our Watcher in the Water. Could our Watcher in the Water be one of Melkor's corrupted creations? Yeah, I suppose that's possible. Again, I'd like the idea that these things are older than even Sauron. To me, if the Watcher fits in with these nameless things, I think perhaps this is something outside of the Maiar spirits. The Balrog is a Maiar spirit, right? He's kind of in the same tier as Gandalf, and he is corrupted by Melkor. But I don't get that sense with the Watcher in the Water. I think the Watcher in the Water is its own entity. Kind of like Ungoliant leads to Shelob. Those are creatures. In fact, Shelob's is a guardian as well, right? As it turns out, Sauron is pretty good at finding or just using the ancient evil creatures to guard his paths without really controlling them. It seems like he just exploits the fact that, I've got this giant multi-tentacled creature hanging out the west gate of Moria. Awesome, we'll just let that stay there. Oh, I've got this big spider that guards the pass into Mordor. Well, we'll just let that stay there. I think, as opposed to being connected to, say, Melkor or Sauron, that this is a creature. Now, the part that's odd is the fact that this creature is attracted to the ring. We do know that the ring can bring creatures to it. We saw that with Isildur. I did a video on the disaster of Gladden Fields. Isildur is bringing the ring to Rivendell to give to Elrond, ostensibly to have it destroyed. But on the way, the implication is that the ring reaches out, finds a nearby orc army, and brings it to Isildur, who is undermanned and gets killed. So perhaps this is a moment where the ring realizes there's an entity that it can either control somewhat or communicate with, and reaches out to the Watcher in the Water. And Frodo is sensing that communication going on, which is why he's freaking out. From the moment I touched the water, I knew something bad was going to happen. So that could explain that. The closing of the doors is the interesting part. It's like once Frodo and company have escaped it, the fact that it shuts them in is an odd thing. Maybe it's shutting them out. Like it's like, okay, the ring is beyond my control now. I'm scared of what it might do to me, so I'm gonna shut it away so that I'm safe. I don't think it has genius level cunning. I think it's probably a creature that is trying to survive, but it has some interesting strategies there. So perhaps it's being controlled in some way, but I think it's reaching out for the ring and then sealing off the bearer of the ring from itself, perhaps. If you've got an idea to explain the Watcher in the Water's actions, feel free to put it in the comments. I'd be happy to chat about that with you. Just to finish up, we've got the Balrog. How is the Balrog there, right, under Moria? Well, the Balrog almost certainly was present at the War of Wrath, took place at the end of the First Age, so thousands of years earlier. That's a war that Melkor / Morgoth's army lost, and this particular creature escaped Angband, which was Morgoth's fortress, and now there were a lot of tunnels underneath Angband. Is it possible that perhaps those tunnels, maybe these nameless things have tunnels that run all the way under the earth, that there's like a network that combines, let's say, Angband, which is nowhere near Moria, to Moria, and that this thing never had to kind of come above ground, stayed underground, and found its way to Moria, and then hid out until Sauron came back and the dwarves delved a little too deep, and he was reawakened all this time. But like the whole second age goes by, and this thing is just like hanging out underneath the mountain. One of the things I noted in that last quote I read you is where, you know, Gandalf is using the Balrog's knowledge of this area to get him out of there, right? And he says, "Thus he brought me back at last to the secret ways of Khazad-dûm. Too well he knew them all." And so that gives you the idea that the Balrog's been living in this area for a long time, and knows how these tunnels, and he knows how they connect to Khazad-dûm, but he's using the structures that were created by these nameless things. And so again, I think maybe one of those nameless things, the one we know, you know, in the area, could easily have been our Watcher in the Water. So there you go, everybody. The Watcher in the Water. I hope you enjoyed this. If you've got a topic you'd like me to discuss, feel free to put it in the comments. I'd be happy to do a video about a topic of your choosing. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.